Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news. You're listening to the Bloomberg Balance of Power podcast. Catch us live weekdays at noon and 5 p.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
We consider what we do know, and that is tariffs are in place. There's been so much uncertainty about the president's tariff regime, and Wall Street has reflected that at times when you think about the swoon that followed the president's so-called Liberation Day. More than 90 countries' reciprocal tariffs went into effect at midnight. The president was on Truth Social to mark the occasion, up late, writing, "It's midnight," in all caps, multiple exclamation points. Billions of dollars in tariffs are now flowing into the United States of America. Exclamation point. We're going to talk with, just a moment from now, with Stephen Miran, the chair of the White House Council of Economic Advisors, about the impact of these tariffs, what might change. We still have an extension with Mexico. We still have a deal looming with China. And we've also got the prospect of secondary sanctions against buyers of Russian oil that would take effect tomorrow. One quick note I want to mention, just crossed the terminal. If you're a ChatGPT user, version 5 is out today. It's just going up this hour. A more powerful GPT-5 model for coding and writing, and it's coming out both paid and free versions to users today. So you'll be probably hearing a lot about ChatGPT-5 at the cocktail parties later on. With tariffs in mind, with the search for a new Fed chair in mind, it's always a pleasure to bring in Laura Davison, Bloomberg's deputy Washington bureau chief, as we wait to hear from Stephen Miran at the White House. Laura, it's great to see you. 200 days. Is it just me, or did the second 100 go by faster than the first?
It was quite speedy.
Yeah.
And much of that was dogged by all of these negotiations and tariff deals.
That's right.
90 deals in 90 days. We didn't quite get that, but there are tariffs now in effect that he originally previewed back in April.
Well, so we should probably detail some of this, because you're right. That was the line from Peter Navarro, 90 deals in 90 days. And we do have tariffs on some 90 countries. But as the president said a couple of weeks ago, a letter is the same as a deal. In many cases, these were simply imposed on nations without there being any agreement.
Yes, though the president has left the door open that there still could be negotiations. Mexico, for example, has sort of deftly navigated that.
Sure.
China, as well, is continuing to negotiate tariffs. The Swiss and this whole deal didn't turn out very well. They came to Washington at the last minute this week to try to negotiate down that 39% whopping tariff that Trump had placed on them, and were unable to do so. But I don't think this is the end of tariff talks.
50 on Brazil. For political reasons, the president is concerned about 50 on India as well. Half of that for India has to do with a specific tariff on Russian oil. But this White House is still hoping for a deal with India, is it not?
They really are. And you see both sort of the Russia piece of this. Trump is potentially having the summit with Putin, as soon as next week. And so you kind of see all of these different geopolitical things. It's sort of a domino effect. If they're able to get a deal with Russia, that might ease some of the India tensions with the Russian oil. So there's a lot of different things that they could still try to navigate. The Indian trade delegation has been one of the most dogged. They've been here for weeks on end, really thought they were going to get a deal. And I think they still are holding out hope that they can.
Pushing back more than a lot of countries. And we remember the Prime Minister Modi was the first visit to this White House. It seemed like this pivot to India was finally happening. But I guess you're telling us that we should still allow some time.
What seems to be sort of the difference here is that Trump has determined that China is too big to bully, but that India is not. And they're trying to figure out, do they take the nice guy approach or do they stand firm? That will remain to be seen over the next several weeks about what kind of deal they get.
So a lot of headlines flying, and boy, all you have to do is look at Truth Social. We could pick our stories here. It's been pretty busy today, Laura, but I want to ask you about the Fed chair with Christopher Waller emerging as a front runner. How quickly did this happen? What do we know? So Trump has been actively doing, and his team have been actively doing interviews with potential Fed chair candidates. This really kicked up as Trump has become more disillusioned with Jay Powell at the head of the central bank. Yeah. There's a bunch of moving pieces here of that. One, Trump has said he's going to announce potentially as soon as tomorrow a temporary Fed pick to fill the seat by Adriana Kugler that is vacated starting tomorrow. This will be someone kind of essentially a caretaker for that seat. He also simultaneously is looking at someone to replace Jay Powell. Waller has emerged as the front runner in those talks and has, but he's already on the board, so he doesn't need to be appointed to a seat.
Plus, there's a third opening coming up, potentially as soon as May next year. If Powell steps off the board, then there'll be a 2-year seat to fill. So there's a lot of different pieces that they're looking for of, filling some of these empty Fed seats that are coming up, as well as finding someone, whether it's someone adding to those seats or someone already on the board like Waller, to be the next chair.
It's a curious approach because I can't figure out the benefit of doing the fill-in other than buying more time, and maybe it's just as simple as that. We're trying to figure out who you want here, but I thought it was the battle of the Kevins. This was Kevin Hassett, right? But Christopher Waller, I guess, has had a pretty good run here in the meantime.
He's had a pretty good run, and he has a lot of support from Wall Street itself. He's very much seen as the safest choice here. Traders would be very happy with him.
Did Hassett and Warsh turn people off?
One of the things is also look at the photos of all of these people. Look who's the tallest person. Look who has the strongest jawline. You think these things...
The strongest jawline. Central casting, you mean?
This is, and that's one of the things that helped Jay Powell out in the search. This helped Scott Bessent when he became Treasury Secretary, if he was one of the tallest people in the lineup.
That's hysterical. Well, so, I talked to Michael McKee about this yesterday, the idea of a fill-in on the Fed. Someone, to your point, already had a couple boxes to check, but already in government, already confirmed. The Deputy Treasury Secretary Faulkner, he's kind of out of central casting.
He's out of central casting.
Someone we should look at?
And he would be easy to just pop into that job for just a handful of months. He was easily confirmed by the Senate when he came through, and kind of has all the credentials. He's a strong Trump and Bessent ally. He would be someone to kind of keep that seat warm, keep things in the direction Trump wants to go until he can continue to play out his Apprentice-style Fed chair pick.
Right. It really does. This is like the grand finale of The Apprentice. Maybe we could get the boardroom set back together here. Secondary sanctions on Russia, something I mentioned before you leave. These would presumably take effect tomorrow, but now we're also hearing about a potential meeting, an in-person meeting between President Trump and Vladimir Putin. They say the next few days. Could we see these two men together this weekend, and would the sanctions wait for that?
Trump has said that those sanctions are going to go into effect regardless of this meeting planning as it comes.
Wow.
They've said it could happen as soon as next week. They still don't have a location. They also, U.S. has said that they're only going to do this if Zelensky is also there. So there's a lot of moving pieces. This may be a Trump sort of win the next 2 weeks and the next couple of days that slides much further than the actual timeline.
Fair enough. You think, though, once they're talking and they're finalizing details, to use the terminology of the Kremlin, that there might be some reprieve here, but we'll obviously have to wait to find out until tomorrow. We don't have a location in mind, right? There's no venue that's been established yet?
Not yet. The Mideast has been thrown out as sort of an option out there, but nothing has been nailed down.
Fascinating. Whether it's Saudi Arabia, UAE, this is going to be quite a moment, Laura, and I'm sure Bloomberg will be on the ground for it. It's great to have you, as always. Helping us set the table here on the Thursday edition of Balance of Power, Laura Davison, our Deputy Bureau Chief in Washington, D.C., who I'm sure is heading straight back to the terminal because 6 more stories have broken. It's that kind of day. Well, day 200 to be more exact. And we want to bring you straight to the White House on this 200th day of the second Trump term for a conversation that dovetails off everything we just discussed with Laura. Stephen Miran has the president's ear when it comes to the economy. He is chair of the White House Council of Economic Advisors, and with us now from the North Lawn on what is, by the way, it's got to be, Stephen, the most beautiful day of the year so far in Washington. Mr. Chairman, welcome back to Bloomberg TV and radio. It's good to see you. Day 200 and the tariffs take effect. I guess we'll start there. Is this it? Are we here? This is the tariff regime? Realizing you've got an extension with Mexico, you're working on a deal with China. These are the numbers that we've been waiting for. Yes? Will they stay in place the way they are?
First of all, thank you for having me. It's great to be back. Look, I think that the restructuring of the global trading system that the president has undertaken and successfully executed has been nothing short of historic. We've got trade deals encompassing material tariff rates bringing in large amounts of revenue with almost no retaliation from countries that now entail about 55 to 60% of global GDP. And that's going to bring in trillions of dollars of revenue over a decade. It creates very strong incentives for making stuff in the United States. And the investment commitments that the president has secured are going to do wonders for getting firms to invest in America.
So if it's going to bring in trillions, then I guess these are the numbers that we'll assume will be in place until further notice. But I'm curious, I saw the president's Truth Social last night. He says, it's midnight, we're here. Do we have a sense of how much money the Treasury has inherited in the last 13 hours or so?
So I don't have a sense about what's happened in the last 13 hours or so, but as you know, in the last month we saw a record print of about $30 billion in the month alone from tariffs, and that was before the higher rates really set in. You know, the CBO did a study when the One Big Beautiful Bill was under consideration in Congress, finding that the total effect of the tariffs would be about $3 trillion over the course of a decade. You know, I think that tariff rates have moved a little bit higher since then, and so my team is actually currently crunching through the numbers right now as we speak with the new tariff rates. But I wouldn't be surprised if the final number is closer to $4 trillion over a decade instead of $3.
Fantastic. Is that something that you'll be able to make public soon? When will we see that research?
Oh yes, I mean I hope so. It's in process right now. I've got several of my staff working on it at the moment.
I love that. Getting a little peek behind the curtain here. To the extent that we're curious about the economic impact of tariffs, Mr. Chairman, you know there has been a grand debate, and your administration is on one side of it, about whether tariffs are inflationary. Now that we actually have the numbers, there's also been reference from yourself and from the likes of Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent about a one-time change in prices as opposed to an inflationary trend. When will we know the impact of that one-time change?
Thanks. So look, you're right. There's been a lot of conversation about this subject, and I think that a few things are worth mentioning. One, we ran this experiment in 2018, 2019. We saw zero macroeconomically significant evidence of tariff-driven inflation then. Two, we've been running higher tariffs in this administration since the very first day, since January 20th. We've now got several months of data, and again, there's just zero macroeconomically significant evidence of price pressures from tariffs. Three, the overall policy mix is extremely disinflationary. When you think about deregulation, when you think about incentives for increased capital stock, increased labor supply from no taxes on overtime, things like that, that's very disinflationary. The border policies are very disinflationary as well. And I think that people are underestimating the amount of service-driven disinflation that's in the pipeline. And I think when you look at the housing market holistically, you get a sense of that as well. So overall, we don't expect significant inflation from the tariffs. And Secretary Bessent is right. If there were to materialize some inflation from tariffs, it would be a one-time price level shift, not an enduring trend, in the same way that a VAT tax would cause that. And there have been many countries throughout the world that have VAT taxes that change those VAT taxes. And when they move them up or they move them down, you get a price level shift. You don't get a new inflation regime that lasts years.
Yeah. Well, then it becomes a question of, you know, who's actually paying for this beyond the specific importer who's standing on the dock here. We're going to talk later with Stu Leonard Jr., the force behind Stu Leonard's, the chain of grocery stores up in New York and Connecticut and the Northeast. It's a really interesting conversation because he said that prices for him are, in fact, costs are rising. And the more important thing he said was he can't afford to absorb it. He's got to pass it along to his customers. What do you say to the CEO, specifically of a small business who's experiencing this phenomenon?
What I would say is that adjustments are difficult and adjustments don't happen overnight. And in the fullness of time, I have no doubt that the countries that we are placing tariffs on will ultimately bear the burden of those tariffs, either through lower prices or through another channel like currencies, as happened in 2018, 2019 with China. Now, that's an argument in the fullness of time. In the short run, there can be price volatility, right? We had volatility in financial markets. We have now seen a little bit of volatility in the real economy as well. And it wouldn't be surprising to me or to anybody else if we saw volatility in prices as in consumer prices as well. However, I think that's merely a short-run adjustment phenomenon. The incentives to make a profit, the bedrock principles of a capitalistic economy will mean that folks like Stu Leonard and others will find ways to provide products to consumers for cheaper, because that's what consumers want. And they'll find ways to adjust their supply chains, to adjust whom they're buying from, to take advantage of different tariff rates in different countries, and find ways to get others to absorb those costs, because they have an incentive to do so.
They're going to have a lot of work to do. I want to ask you about the tariffs on chips and semiconductors. Red headline on the terminal last evening, Mr. Chairman, when the president said 100% as he was talking to reporters in the Oval Office. But I realize there are some very important exceptions here for chip designers and chip makers who are actively investing and building in the United States. And to my read, that covers most of the majors here, including TSMC, which is building in Arizona and some other places. Who would this tariff actually impact, or will it not touch anyone other than a foreign maker like, say, Huawei that isn't already selling here?
Yeah, so not to get ahead of Secretary Lutnick and the other folks who are going to be designing this program, but I would be surprised if there weren't some guardrails around those criteria to make sure that companies were doing the types of investments that warranted that type of exemption that you just mentioned, right? And so, are countries investing enough to build their supply in the United States? Are they making good faith progress and good faith outlays that are leading to actual genuine increases in the productive capacity of the United States? It's not enough to say, oh, I'll build a factory and stick a pickaxe in the ground and then just leave it there for 10 years collecting a tariff exemption. Sure. There's going to be checks to make sure that good faith efforts are made to actually expand production in the United States. And if that's happening, then that's exactly the outcome we want, right? Like, what we want is to increase domestic production of critical components like semiconductors.
Just a minute left here, Chairman. I have to just quickly ask you about the search for a new Federal Reserve chair. Bloomberg is reporting today that Governor Waller, Christopher Waller, is emerging as a top candidate. The president's advisors have been very impressed with his approach to monetary policy. Are you one of those advisors making that recommendation?
Look, I think that Governor Waller has really built up a really impressive track record in the last few years at the Fed, with his predictions about inflation, with his predictions about where Fed policy needed to move to respond to that inflation. And I think he's done himself a big credit recently as well, not succumbing to the tariff derangement syndrome that many others throughout the country, but particularly at the Fed, seem to have succumbed to. And he's done a really good job having an independent voice, which I think ultimately is proving correct, that there isn't really much of an inflationary threat from tariffs that anyone should really be concerned about, least of all the Fed.
Yeah. It sounds like you're in his corner. That sounds like a yes, Mr. Chairman. It's great to have you with us. Stephen Miran from the North Lawn of the White House. We thank you for the insights, as always. Tariff derangement syndrome. Did he just come up with that? We'll assemble our political panel next. Adam Hodge and Rick Davis are on the way in, only here on Bloomberg.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Balance of Power podcast. Catch us live weekdays at noon and 5 p.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Day 200 for Donald Trump. Remember, everyone had a special plan for day 100? I don't think it has quite the same impact, but it does coincide with some pretty important news, including, as we were just discussing with Stephen Miran, really interesting conversation there with the chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors. It coincides with the implementation of reciprocal tariffs. They hit at midnight, more than 90 countries waking up to a new reality this morning, as they are obviously being tariffed for goods coming into the U.S. But we've also got the potential, the president says it happens no matter what, for secondary sanctions against countries buying oil from Russia tomorrow, all along with talk of an in-person meeting between President Trump and Vladimir Putin. This is a pretty interesting inflection point for this administration, and we have a great panel to walk through some of it. Bloomberg Politics contributors Rick Davis and Adam Hodge are here. Rick is our Republican strategist and partner at Stone Court Capital, and of course, Adam, our Democratic strategist, Bully Pulpit International. Great to have both of you with us here. Adam, the first 200 days of the Trump administration has begun a reordering of our economy. We were just talking about this new tariff regime with Stephen Miran, who had nothing but good things to say about it. The money that's coming into the country, the growth that he says will come from this. We're making the playing field even again. What's the problem with that?
Well, I think one of the problems is the president has put a gun to the head of the global economy and said, everybody get online or you're going to face higher prices. But I think what was striking to me is that you had official from a Republican White House acknowledge that they're raising taxes on the American people. And even Rand Paul today was taking the White House, a little bit to task for now being the party of raising taxes on working families. And I think that is a one-time hike on some of the prices that you don't think this may compound month over month, but the president ran on lowering costs for the American people. And you compound that with some of the actions on immigration, which reduced the labor supply, some of the other policy measures that they put in place. And it's a bit of an opportunity for Democrats, I think, to make the case that the president has broken his promise to lower costs on working families. And that's what I think you'll hear from Democrats going forward.
Yeah. How are you thinking about this today, Rick? Because the president would tell you need a little bit of pain for a long-term gain. This is years in the making. I need a minute. I need some space to reset the playing field. Most every major economist tells us it's going to send prices higher.
Yeah, look, I think they've leaned in on this notion that change is going to have an effect, sometimes good, sometimes negative. And you also hear at the same time, hey, we've just raised billions, hundreds of billions of dollars of new revenue, not targeted to be used for anything in particular right now. We don't know what that revenue is going to go to, but potentially trillions over 10 years, offsetting some of the debate about the massive deficits that they're running up with the big, beautiful bill. So, yeah, I think it's a pretty practical conversation about whether or not we can survive economically in a tariff regime that would actually help expand the U.S. wealth. And enter us into what Donald Trump calls the golden age. And so as that debate wages on, you got to admit these first 200 days have been, a drumbeat of activity that has restructured not just trade all around the world, but our global relationships, our domestic, industries, healthcare, education, the legal system. It's phenomenal when you think of the breadth of what this president's done in 200 days. Whether you like what he's done or not, he's done a lot.
Yeah, well, the president says on Truth Social, Adam, tariffs are flowing into the USA at levels not thought even possible. But tariffs don't flow into the USA. Don't we pay them?
That's right. Yes, no, absolutely. Americans are paying them. I'm not sure how much wine you're importing from France these days, Joe, but the price of them are going up 15%, and that is true for companies like Ford, right, who are now going to see and have been beating the drum about the pain that it will cost to their bottom line from how having to import steel and aluminum from Canada as part of our North American supply chain at significantly higher prices. And there's no question that eventually will lead to higher prices for your F-150 or for other commodities. I think you raised the example of Stu Leonard's, fabulous grocery chain from my old high school days. You can't get bananas from a whole lot of other places in the U.S., right? There are goods that are just not capable of coming from other places that we just cannot make here in the U.S. or don't produce here for various reasons. And that's going to lead to higher prices for the American people. And I think that is going to be a tough pill for the American voter to swallow, especially as you head into the midterms.
Yes, so Stu Leonard Jr. is going to join us later on, Rick, and he was making the point here. Everybody loves Stu Leonard's, I guess, that he says costs are up and I can't afford it. I need to start passing it on. If we start seeing that more and more in mainstream news coverage, what does that do to the argument coming out of the White House?
Yeah, I'm not even sure that you need more mainstream news coverage. I mean, when you look at consumer surveys, my favorite things to study, these are grumpy consumers. They're not happy with the higher costs that they're paying. They expected lower grocery costs, expected lower gas costs. There's a lot that isn't fulfilled in the promise of the Trump administration. We talked about how much he's doing. But that piece of it right now, especially as you start to look across the horizon at the 2026 midterm elections, they got to fix that because consumers vote on their pocketbook. We hear it over and over and over again, constantly telling elected officials this is what matters most. All this other stuff, window dressing. They're not going to decide on who to vote for because of the tariffs. They're going to decide on that banana cost.
Yes, right.
And so we're still in a banana economy. We got to constantly remind ourselves of that. And right now, unless something changes, you got a bunch of grumpy consumers looking at this administration saying, maybe we need change in Congress.
There are two posts I want to ask you about on this 200th day. President didn't get a lot of sleep last night. The midnight post on the tariffs, I guess, would be evidence of that. But they kept rolling in this morning. There are two that jump off the page or the screen or whatever you have here. One is about Intel. President writes, the CEO of Intel is highly conflicted and must resign immediately. There is no other solution to this problem. Thank you for your attention to this problem! Exclamation point. And this follows allegations that the new CEO, not so new CEO, is tied to the PRC. Separate Trump post, Truth Social. He says, now that the nuclear arsenal being created by Iran has been totally obliterated, it is very important to me, that all Middle Eastern countries join the Abraham Accords. This will ensure peace in the Middle East. Does this president see him as the president himself, as the president of the world, Adam, as well as the chairman of every board?
I mean, that certainly seems like it. I mean, I would just take a step back. If you had a Democratic president calling for the firing of the CEO of a major U.S. company, Republicans would be screaming from the rooftops about a socialist republic, about socialism run amok in the country, the president picking winners and losers in the business community. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. And I think it is something that I think people is shot across the bow for corporate America. And I don't think it's going to lead a whole lot of businesses feeling comfortable about the decisions that they make and the choices they make going forward.
Is this just Trump being Trump? What do you make of these messages?
Donald Trump, xenophobia. I mean, come on. I mean, like, that shouldn't surprise anybody at this stage, whether it's Mexico or China or any other country that he sees as a blacklisted country.
Sure.
But I think this point you make about does he see himself as president of the world is really fascinating because, like, he came to office where people thought, oh, they're rolling up the carpets. We're not going to do business with anybody else. And he's been arguably the most integrated president on a global scale in our lifetimes.
Wow.
And when you look at all the bilateral activity he's done, trade, I mean, like, you don't have to like what he's done, but he has been more active on a global front, and it's been based on the U.S. is the most powerful nation in the world, both militarily and economically, and we're going to flex our power around the world. Right. So, you know, I think the last time I saw a president like this, and he's my favorite president, so I don't want to compare the two, but Teddy Roosevelt understood the world.
Wow, Rick Davis.
Understood our role in the world, and he carried that big stick. And Donald Trump, in his own kind of different way, I think sees himself the same way.
What do you think about that, Adam? When he tries to influence developments in other nations, it's almost every day, either on Truth Social or in front of cameras and microphones.
I mean, it's the way that Donald Trump sees himself and his ego. I mean, he views himself as president of the world. And look, the president of the United States often does carry that big stick, that influence, and we are able through either the might and being right on a range of issues to being the world superpower and who helps shape the way the world works. That's the privilege that the president has to bear. And so I think that's something that I would think you should not be surprised at necessarily. And I think Trump, like with most things, is going to take it to the extreme.
See the president on the roof the other day? He's walking around the colonnade on the roof.
Oh, yeah.
Is there going to be a second floor on the West Wing by the 300th day? What's going on over there?
Yeah, no, it wouldn't surprise me. I think we're into a redevelopment phase for the White House. I mean, obviously the ballroom's getting most of its attention, but he wasn't on a roof to talk about the ballroom.
There he is.
So, I mean, and maybe someone told him no president has ever been on the roof of the White House. So, boom, let's go.
There he is. If you're with us on YouTube or Bloomberg TV, he was describing, he said something beautiful with that hand gesture that he's working on. Maybe it's skylights or something, Adam. Maybe they are going to put the swimming pool in up there. We do understand the gold leaf is being added to the ceiling of the Oval Office. Will this White House look different forever because of this man?
I mean, no question. I think, look at what's happened at the disgrace in the Rose Garden. I mean, I'm biased, but I just think it's totally changing the face of the way that the White House looks. And this has happened throughout history. I think, though, that Democrats can't get sidetracked into some of these issues and talking about a ballroom or the Rose Garden or everything else.
Yeah, sure.
Laser focused on the unpopularity of the big, beautiful bill. And that's what I think you'll see Democrats, if they're smart, that's what they'll focus on, because it is a lead balloon on the president's popularity with the American people, with the voters that put him in the Oval Office. And I think that's where you think Democrats should focus on going forward.
Sure. I just think it's fun for us DC guys to talk about. Adam, thank you so much. And Rick Davis, Adam Hodge, Bloomberg Politics contributors. We'll get to the road show on the big, beautiful bill next time we talk. Thanks for listening to the Balance of Power podcast. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already at Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can find us live every weekday from Washington, D.C. at noontime Eastern at Bloomberg.com.